A ruthless billionaire crashes on a rainy night and wakes with no memory on a quiet farm. But as his past comes looking for him, he faces an impossible choice: return to power or stay for love. Before we get into the story, comment below where, in the world you're watching from today. The tires of Chase Easton's sleek black Porsche squealed as he took the curve too fast on the narrow country road. Rain pounded against the windshield, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Chase grabbed his phone from the passenger seat, glancing at it impatiently while trying to keep his eyes on the road. "Thompson, I don't care what time it is in Tokyo. Get them on the phone now," Chase barked into the device. At 41, Chase Easton had built his reputation as one of Manhattan's most ruthless businessmen. His face regularly appeared in financial magazines with headlines like "The Shark of Wall Street" and "Billion-Dollar Bachelor." Tonight, he was speeding through upstate New York, returning from a failed acquisition meeting. The target company's CEO had refused his offer at the last minute, and Chase wasn't used to hearing the word no. "Sir, about the Nakamura deal," his assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. "There is no deal unless—" Chase never finished his sentence. A deer appeared suddenly in the headlights. Chase swerved sharply, the Porsche hydroplaning on the wet asphalt. The world spun in terrifying circles as the car skidded off the road and plunged down an embankment. The last thing Chase remembered was the sickening crunch of metal and the cold rush of rain through the shattered windshield before everything went black. Ellie Garner pulled her weathered pickup truck to a stop when she noticed the broken guardrail. At 38, Ellie had lived on Cedar Hill Farm her entire life. She knew every curve and ditch on these country roads, and something was wrong. Grabbing her flashlight from the glove compartment, she stepped out into the rain. The beam of light revealed deep tire tracks in the mud leading down the steep embankment. Ellie's heart raced as she carefully made her way down the slippery slope. The light soon fell upon the crumpled remains of what had once been an expensive sports car. "Hello?" she called out, approaching cautiously. "Is anyone there?" A low groan answered her. Ellie rushed forward, shining her light through the broken driver's side window. A man was slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "Don't move," she instructed firmly. "I'm going to help you." After checking that he wasn't trapped by the crushed metal, Ellie carefully helped the semi-conscious man from the wreckage. He was tall and lean, dressed in what remained of an expensive suit. His dark hair was matted with blood, and his eyes couldn't seem to focus. "Nakamura," he mumbled. "The deal, the stocks—" "Shh, don't worry about that now," Ellie soothed as she helped him up the embankment to her truck. "We need to get you help." Chase drifted in and out of consciousness. Fragments of sensations came to him through the fog. The rumble of an engine, a woman's voice speaking softly on the phone, the smell of rain and hay. "Dr. Sanders, it's Ellie Garner." "Yes, I know what time it is." "There's been an accident on Route 16. No, I can't get him to Ridgemont Hospital in this storm. The bridge is probably flooded by now. He's got a bad head wound and possibly a broken rib." "Okay. Yes, I remember how to check for a concussion." "All right, I'll see you when the road's clear." Chase felt himself being moved again, strong but gentle hands supporting him. Then he was lying on something soft. A warm blanket was pulled over him, and a cool cloth dabbed at his forehead. "What? Where am I?" Chase managed to ask, his voice a dry rasp. "You're at Cedar Hill Farm," the woman's voice answered. "I'm Ellie. You had an accident on the road. The nearest doctor is 60 miles away and he can't get here until the storm passes." Chase tried to sit up but was immediately overcome by dizziness. Ellie's hands gently pressed him back down. "Easy now. You've got a nasty cut on your head and probably a concussion. Dr. Sanders talked me through checking you over. Nothing seems broken, but you need to rest." Chase blinked, trying to focus on the woman's face. She had warm hazel eyes and chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her face was tan and slightly freckled, with laugh lines around her eyes that suggested she smiled often. "My phone," Chase said suddenly. "I need to call my office." "I'm sorry, but your phone was destroyed in the crash, and the landlines are down because of the storm. We're cut off until morning at least." Chase tried to remember what he'd been doing before the crash, but his thoughts were scattered and disjointed. A strange panic began to rise in his chest. "What's your name?" Ellie asked, her voice calm and steady. Chase opened his mouth to answer, but to his shock, nothing came. He knew he should know this. It was the most basic information about himself, but his mind was a complete blank. I don't know," he admitted, real fear creeping into his voice. "I can't remember." Ellie's expression grew concerned, but her voice remained steady. "That's okay. Sometimes with head injuries there can be temporary memory loss. Dr. Sanders said it might happen. Just rest now. We'll figure everything out in the morning." She stood up, and Chase noticed they were in a rustic farmhouse kitchen. Through the windows he could see rain lashing against the glass and hear the wind howling outside. "Wait," he called as she turned to leave. "Don't go." Something in his voice must have revealed his fear, because Ellie's expression softened. She pulled a chair closer to the couch where he lay. "I'll stay until you fall asleep," she promised. The next morning, Chase woke to the sound of a rooster crowing. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, creating patterns on the wooden floor. For a moment he had no idea where he was or how he had gotten there. Then fragments of the previous night returned. The crash, the rain, the woman with hazel eyes. He sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in his ribs. His head throbbed, and when he touched it, he felt a bandage covering his left temple. Looking down, he realized someone had removed his ruined suit jacket and shirt, leaving him in an undershirt. A plaid flannel blanket covered his legs. Chase tried again to remember who he was, but it was like trying to recall a dream that faded upon waking. He knew facts about the world. He recognized a kitchen, knew what a car was, understood language, but his personal details were simply gone. The sea. Door opened, and Ellie entered carrying a tray with a steaming mug and a plate of food. Today he could see her clearly. She wore well-worn jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Her hair was tied back in the same practical ponytail, and a few strands had escaped to frame her face. "Good morning," she said with a small smile. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was hit by a truck," Chase answered honestly. "But I'm alive thanks to you." Ellie set the tray down on a small table beside the couch. "I brought you some breakfast. Nothing fancy, just eggs from my chickens and some toast." Chase took the mug she offered. The rich aroma of coffee filled his nostrils, and somehow he knew. He liked it black. A small victory, a piece of himself remembered. "Has my memory loss confused you?" he asked after taking a sip. Ellie shook her head. "Dr. Sanders said it might take time. The important thing is that you're okay physically. He'll be here later today to check on you." "Thank you for helping me," Chase said, surprising himself, with the sincerity in his voice. Somehow he knew gratitude didn't come easily to him. Ellie's cheeks colored slightly. Anyone would have done the same. But Chase wasn't so sure. There was something about this woman's kindness that seemed rare and precious. "Do you have any ID in your wallet?" she asked practically. That might help. Chase realized he hadn't even thought of that. "I don't know. I don't even know where my wallet is." "It's right here," Ellie said, picking up a sleek leather wallet from the side table. "I didn't want to go through it without your permission." Chase took it, feeling the expensive leather between his fingers. Opening it, he found several credit cards, all bearing the name Chase Easton. There was a New York driver's license with his photo and an address in Manhattan. "Chase," he said, testing the name on his tongue. It didn't trigger any flood of memories, but it felt right somehow. "My name is Chase Easton. I live in New York City." Ellie smiled. "Well, that's a start." Chase continued looking through the wallet. There were business cards that identified him as the CEO of Easton Enterprises. Several $100 bills were neatly folded in the billfold section. "I'm some kind of businessman," he said, trying to connect with the information. He remembered fragments now. Boardrooms, stock prices, the feeling of signing important documents. But it was all disconnected, like watching scenes from someone else's life. "Looks like a successful one," Ellie commented, glancing at the platinum credit cards. Chase tried to stand up but wobbled unsteadily. Ellie quickly moved to support him. "Whoa, take it easy," she cautioned. "Your body needs time to recover." "I should get back to New York," Chase said. though the thought didn't fill him with any urgency. In fact, the idea of returning to whatever life was waiting for him there left him strangely cold. "You're not going anywhere until Dr. Sanders checks you out," Ellie said firmly. "Besides, your car is totaled, and the nearest rental place is 2 hours away." The front door opened and an elderly man entered, stomping mud from his boots. "Morning, sunshine," he called cheerfully. "Heard we got ourselves a city slicker in the ditch." "Dad, this is Chase," Ellie said. "Chase, this is my father, Henry." Henry Garner was in his 70s, with the weathered face of a man who had spent his life outdoors. His eyes held the same warmth as his daughter's, though they seemed to focus and unfocus at odd moments. "Any man Ellie pulls from a wreck is welcome at our table," Henry declared, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Long as he earns his keep." "Dad," Ellie said in a warning tone. "What?" "Man's got to be useful if he's staying," Henry insisted. "Even if he is hurt." "I don't mind," Chase found himself saying. "I'd like to help out to repay your kindness." Henry nodded approvingly. "Good man. Once the doc says you're able, we'll find something for you to do that won't strain those city hands too much." Ellie shot her father an exasperated look before turning back to Chase. "Don't mind him, you're our guest, not our farmhand." Chase smiled, finding himself drawn to the easy banter between father and daughter. "Really, I want to help. Even if I can't remember who I am, I'm not used to sitting around." Something about physical work appealed to him. His hands might be soft, but there was a part of him that craved something real and tangible, something different from the business world that felt both familiar and foreign. "The doc will be here in a few hours," Ellie said. "Until then, you should rest." In a glass skyscraper in Manhattan, Victoria Reed strode into the executive suite of Easton Enterprises, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. At 35, Victoria was Chase Easton's executive assistant and had been for the past 7 years. She knew everything about her boss, from how he liked his coffee to which board members he considered expendable. "Still no word from Mr. Easton?" asked James Thompson, the company's CFO, meeting her at the door. Victoria shook her head, worry evident in her normally composed features. "His phone goes straight to voicemail. He missed the Tokyo call and the board meeting this morning. This isn't like him." "The shareholders are getting nervous," Thompson said, lowering his voice. "And Derek Reynolds has already called twice." Victoria's lips thinned at the mention of Reynolds, Chase's main rival in the business world. "What does he want?" "To express concern about Chase's absence," Thompson replied with air quotes. "But we both know he's fishing for information." "File a missing persons report," Victoria decided, "and call Chase's brother, Andrew." Thompson looked surprised. "They haven't spoken in years." "I know," Victoria said grimly, "but he's family and he should know. Something's wrong, James. Chase would never disappear like this, not with the Nakamura deal on the line." As they spoke, neither noticed Robert Kane, Chase's vice president, listening from the doorway, a calculating expression on his face as he slipped away to make a private phone call. "It's me," Kane said quietly into his phone. "Easton's missing. This might be the opportunity we've been waiting for." Dr. Sanders arrived at Cedar Hill Farm just after noon. He was a gray-haired man in his 60s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ellie led him to the living room where Chase was resting. "So you're our mystery patient," Dr. Sanders said, as he set his medical bag on the coffee table. "Ellie tells me you've had some memory trouble." Chase nodded. "I know my name is Chase Easton. I found that in my wallet. But that's all. Everything else is just blank." Dr. Sanders examined the cut on Chase's head, checking his pupils with a small flashlight and testing his reflexes. "The good news is that physically, you're doing better than I expected," the doctor said. "The cut isn't as deep as it looked, and your ribs are bruised, not broken. But that memory loss is concerning. Will it come back?" Chase asked. Dr. Sanders packed his stethoscope back in his bag. "In most cases, yes. Retrograde amnesia from head trauma is usually temporary. Could be days, could be weeks. Best thing is not to force it." Ellie stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "So he shouldn't try to get back to his life in New York right away." "I wouldn't recommend it," Dr. Sanders said firmly. "Physical rest for at least a week, and the unfamiliar surroundings might actually help. Sometimes being away from routine lets the mind heal in its own time." After the doctor left, Chase found himself alone with Ellie in the kitchen. She was washing dishes at the sink, sunlight from the window catching in her hair. "Looks like you're stuck with me for a while longer," Chase said. Ellie glanced over her shoulder. "You heard the doctor. You need rest." "Your father seemed to think I should earn my keep," Chase reminded her with a small smile. Ellie dried her hands on a dish towel and turned to face him. "Dad's old-fashioned. Don't mind him." "I don't mind at all," Chase insisted. "I'd like to help. Sitting around thinking about what I can't remember will drive me crazy." Ellie studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but nothing strenuous. Maybe you can help feed the animals once you're steadier on your feet." Chase felt an unexpected wave of relief. The thought of having something simple and straightforward to do appealed to him in ways he couldn't explain. In Manhattan, Victoria Reed had just finished filing a missing persons report when Andrew Easton walked into Chase's office. Andrew was 3 years younger than Chase, with the same dark hair but a softer build and gentler eyes. "Any news?" Andrew asked without preamble. Victoria shook her head. "Nothing since he left the Nakamura meeting. His car's GPS last pinged near Riverside in upstate New York, but then went offline." Andrew ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Victoria had seen Chase make 1,000 times when stressed. "This isn't like him. Chase never goes off-grid, especially not during a major deal." "The police are checking hospitals in the area," Victoria said. "But so far, nothing." The office door opened, and Robert Kane entered without knocking. His expensive suit and slick smile always reminded Victoria of a snake oil salesman. "Andrew, good to see you," Kane said smoothly. "Shame about the circumstances." Andrew nodded stiffly. He'd never trusted Kane, especially after Chase had confided his suspicions that Kane was feeding information to their competitors. "The board is meeting in an hour," Kane continued. "Given Chase's unexplained absence, they'll need to appoint temporary leadership." "And I suppose you volunteered?" Andrew asked coolly. Kane's smile didn't waver. "Someone has to keep the ship afloat. The Nakamura deal is hanging by a thread." After Kane left, Victoria turned to Andrew. "We need to find Chase before Kane dismantles everything he's built." Andrew's expression hardened with determination. "I'll go to upstate New York myself. Start where his phone last pinged and work outward." "I'm coming with you," Victoria said, already grabbing her coat. "Chase would do the same for either of us." 3 days passed at Cedar Hill Farm. Chase's physical strength returned quickly, though his memories remained stubbornly absent. True to his word, he began helping with small chores around the farm. He learned to feed the sheep and goats, though the animals seemed to sense his city background and regarded him with suspicion at first. Ellie found him one morning attempting to repair a section of broken fence. He'd rolled up the sleeves of Tay borrowed flannel shirt, revealing surprisingly strong forearms as he hammered a post into place. "You're getting better at that," she remarked, handing him a glass of lemonade. Chase paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Your father gave me a quick lesson before he went into town." He took the glass gratefully. "Though I think I'm still doing it wrong." Ellie examined his work. "Not bad for a city boy." "How do you know I'm a city boy?" Chase asked with a half smile. "I could be a secret farmer." Ellie laughed, and the sound made something warm unfurl in Chase's chest. "Your hands gave you away the first day," she said. "No calluses, and you jumped the first time the rooster crowed." Chase chuckled. "Fair enough." He looked out across the rolling pasture where sheep grazed peacefully under the autumn sun. "It's beautiful here." "It's home," Ellie said simply. "Have you always lived here?" Chase asked, realizing he knew almost nothing about this woman who had saved his life. Ellie nodded. "Born and raised. My great-grandfather built this place. Married and had kids here. Lost my mother here." She paused, then added softly, "Lost my husband here too." Chase looked at her in surprise. "You were married?" 5 years ago, Ellie said, her eyes fixed on the distant hills. "Tom, cancer. It was quick. 6 months from diagnosis to the end." "I'm sorry," Chase said, meaning it. Ellie's smile was tinged with sadness. "Life goes on. The animals still need feeding. The crops still need tending. The farm doesn't care if your heart is broken." Chase wanted to reach out to her but held back. "Your father mentioned you took care of him too." Ellie's expression shifted to one of loving concern. Dad has good days and bad days. The doctor in town says it's early-stage dementia. Some days he forgets what year it is. Other days he's sharp as ever. That must be hard, Chase said. It's life, Ellie replied with a shrug. But Chase could see the weight she carried. Come on, I'll show you how to properly secure that crossbeam. As she demonstrated the correct technique, their hands briefly touched. Chase felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with his missing memories. He found himself studying the curve of her cheek, the determination in her eyes, the graceful strength in her movements. For the first time since waking up in this strange place, Chase felt something, familiar, attraction, pure and simple. And that surprised him more than anything else. That evening they ate dinner together in the farmhouse kitchen. Henry was having a good day, entertaining them with stories of the farm's history. My father built this place with his bare hands, Henry said proudly. Of course, back then it was just the main house and the barn. Added the east field when I was about 12. Chase listened with genuine interest. Something about the family's connection to this land spoke to a part of him he didn't know existed. Do you remember anything more about your life in the city? Ellie asked as she cleared the plates. Chase frowned. Bits and pieces. I remember tall buildings, the sound of traffic, a corner coffee shop where the barista always got my order wrong. He smiled ruefully. But nothing that tells me who I really am. Maybe that fancy watch of yours has some clues, Henry suggested, pointing to Chase's wrist. Chase looked down at the expensive timepiece he'd been wearing since the accident. He hadn't paid it much attention before. Turning it over, he noticed an inscription on the back, to Chase. Time is our most valuable asset. Use it wisely. A.E. A.E., Chase repeated. Someone with the same last name as me, maybe a father, brother. Might be, Ellie agreed. Does it bring back any memories? Chase concentrated, trying to connect the initials to a face or a voice. But nothing came. No, nothing concrete. After dinner, Chase helped Ellie wash the dishes while Henry dozed in his armchair in the living room. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Ellie washing, Chase drying. I should try to get back to New York soon, Chase said suddenly, though the words brought him no joy. Someone must be looking for me. Ellie handed him a wet plate, her fingers lingering against his for a moment. So of course you have a life there. Probably people who care about you who are worried. Do you think so? Chase asked, surprised by the doubt in his voice. Ellie glanced at him curiously. You're a successful businessman with expensive clothes and a fancy watch. I'm sure there are people missing you. Chase nodded, but something in his gut told him it might not be that simple. Maybe tomorrow we could go into town, see about arranging transportation back to the city. If you're sure you're ready, Ellie agreed, though her tone was hesitant. Later, as Chase lay on the cot Ellie had set up for him in the small guest room, he found himself thinking not about the mystery of his past, but about Ellie's smile, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed. The gentle strength in her hands as she tended to her father or the animals. It made no sense. His life was in New York. His business, his home, whatever family or relationships he had, they were all waiting for him there. So why did the thought of leaving this farm, of leaving Ellie, fill him with such unease? The next morning, Chase woke early and decided to make himself useful by feeding the chickens. As he scattered feed in the coop, he heard the rumble of an approaching vehicle. Looking up, he saw a battered pickup truck coming up the long driveway. A tall, lean man in his 40s stepped out, wearing jeans and a worn leather jacket. He walked with the confident stride of someone comfortable with himself and his surroundings. Morning? The man called, spotting Chase by the chicken coop. Is Ellie around? She's in the barn, Chase replied, instantly wary of this stranger who seemed so familiar with Ellie. The man approached, his keen eyes taking in Chase's borrowed clothes and the fading cut on his forehead. How you must be the accident victim, she mentioned. I'm Jack Harris, veterinarian. I handle most of the livestock care in the county. Chase Easton, Chase replied, shaking the man's offered hand. Jack's grip was firm, his gaze assessing. Easton? Why does that name sound familiar? Jack mused. Before Chase could respond, Ellie emerged from the barn, wiping her hands on her jeans. Her face lit up when she saw the visitor. "Jack, I was hoping you'd stop by. One of the ewes seems off her feed." Jack smiled warmly at Ellie, and Chase felt an unexpected pang of jealousy. It was clear these two had history. "Let me take a look," Jack said, then glanced back at Chase. "Nice to meet you, Easton." Ellie's got a habit of collecting strays, animals, people. She's got a good heart. As Jack and Ellie walked toward the sheep pen, deep in conversation, Chase watched them go with a frown. The easy familiarity between them suggested they were more than just friends. He was surprised by how much that bothered him. Later, as Jack was preparing to leave, Chase overheard him talking quietly to Ellie by his truck. "Are you sure you should have a stranger staying here?" Jack asked. "You and Henry are pretty isolated out here." "He was hurt, Jack," Ellie replied defensively. "What was I supposed to do? You could have called me. I would have come right away, like you did when the storm hit last winter." Ellie's voice had an edge to it now. "3 days, Jack. We were snowed in for 3 days before you bothered to check on us." Jack sighed. "Ellie, that's not fair. You know I had emergency calls all over the county." "I know," Ellie said, her tone softening. "But I can take care of myself, and Chase isn't a threat. He's lost and confused, and he needs help. Just be careful," Jack warned. "There's something familiar about him. I feel like I've seen his face somewhere before." After Jack left, Ellie found Chase in the kitchen, absently stirring a cup of coffee. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," Chase replied, then hesitated. "Are you and Jack?" Ellie raised an eyebrow. "Are we what?" "Together," Chase finished, feeling foolish for asking. Ellie's laugh held more sadness than humor. "No, not for lack of trying on his part, but no. We dated in high school, stayed friends. After Tom died, he made it clear he'd be interested in rekindling things, but..." She shrugged. The timing never felt right. Chase felt a ridiculous sense of relief at her words. "He seems concerned about you." "Jack worries," Ellie said dismissively. "Are you still set on going to town today?" Chase thought about it for a moment. "Maybe we should wait another day or two. I'm still getting headaches, and the doctor said not to rush things." Ellie studied him curiously but nodded. "Whatever you think is best. No rush." As she left to continue her chores, Chase wondered why the thought of delaying his return to New York felt so right when it made so little logical sense. The more time he spent with Ellie, the less eager he was to reclaim his old life, a life he couldn't even remember. Andrew Easton and Victoria Reed sat in a small cafe in Riverside, frustrated after 2 days of searching with no results. "The police checked all the hospitals in a 50-mile radius," Victoria said, reviewing her notes. "No one matching Chase's description has been admitted." Andrew stared into his coffee cup. "He has to be somewhere. People don't just vanish, especially not people as high profile as Chase," Victoria agreed. "But this area is full of small farms and back roads. If he had an accident somewhere remote..." The cafe door opened and a middle-aged man in a worn leather jacket entered. He nodded to the waitress and took a seat at the counter. "Morning, Jack," the waitress called cheerfully. "The usual?" "Please, Darlene," he replied. "Been a long morning. Already. Had to check Ellie Garner's sheet before my regular rounds." Victoria, who had been scrolling through her phone, suddenly froze. Looking up, she nudged Andrew and whispered, "Did he say Garner? Wasn't that one of the family names on the list of local farms the sheriff gave us?" Andrew nodded slowly. "Cedar Hill Farm, I think. We haven't checked there yet." They listened more intently as Jack continued chatting with the waitress. "Ellie's got some city slicker staying with her," Jack was saying. "Found him in a car wreck during that big storm last week. Guy's got amnesia or something. Can't remember who he is." Victoria's eyes widened. She and Andrew exchanged a look of renewed hope. "Excuse me," Andrew said, approaching the counter. "I couldn't help overhearing. This man at Cedar Hill Farm, what does he look like?" Jack turned, studying Andrew with suspicion. "Who's asking?" "My name is Andrew Easton. I'm looking for my brother, Chase. He went missing in this area about a week ago." Jack's expression changed to one of surprise. "Easton, I knew that name sounded familiar." He pulled out his phone, quickly searching something. "Is this him?" he asked, showing Andrew a news article with Chase's photo. Andrew nodded eagerly. "That's Chase. You said he's at Cedar Hill Farm. Is he all right? Banged up from the accident and memories shot, Jack explained, but otherwise seemed okay when I saw him this morning. Victoria was already gathering her things. Can you tell us how to get to this farm? Jack hesitated. Look, Ellie's a friend of mine. She took this guy in out of kindness. I don't want to bring trouble to her door. We're not trouble, Andrew assured him. Chase is my brother. We just want to bring him home. Jack finally nodded, giving them directions to Cedar Hill Farm. As Andrew and Victoria hurried to their rental car, Victoria pulled out her phone. Should I call the office? She asked. Let them know we found him. Andrew thought for a moment, then shook his head. Not yet. Let's make sure it's really Chase first, and if it is, he hesitated. Let's find out why he hasn't tried to contact us himself. As they drove toward Cedar Hill Farm, neither noticed the black sedan parked across the street, or the man inside making a phone call. It's Kane, Robert said into his phone. They found him. Looks like our window of opportunity just got a lot smaller. Early morning sunlight streamed through the barn windows as Chase stacked hay bales. His body had grown stronger over the past week, muscles adjusting to farm work in ways that surprised him. While his memories remained frustratingly absent, his hands had learned new skills, feeding animals, mending fences, even helping Ellie milk the goats. You're getting good at that, Ellie remarked as she entered the barn, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Chase smiled, accepting the offered mug. Still can't remember my stock portfolio, but I can stack hay. Some trade-off. Ellie leaned against a post, studying him. You haven't mentioned going back to New York for a few days now. Chase paused, realizing she was right. The urgency he'd initially felt about returning to his old life had faded, replaced by a contentment he'd never expected. I guess I'm not in a hurry, he admitted. I like it here. On a sheep farm? Ellie asked skeptically. A far cry from Manhattan penthouses and boardrooms. Chase took a sip of his coffee. Maybe that's why I like it. It feels real. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Chase took a step closer to her, drawn by a pull he couldn't explain, but couldn't resist either. Ellie, he began, his voice low. I may not remember my past, but I know how I feel right now, and... Ellie, Henry's voice called from outside. We've got visitors. The moment broke. Ellie set down her mug and headed for the barn door, with Chase following close behind. Outside, a black SUV was pulling up the driveway, dust billowing behind its tires. "See. You expecting someone?" Chase asked, a sudden uneasiness settling in his stomach. Ellie shook her head. No one but Jack later today. They walked toward the house as 2 people emerged from the vehicle, a man with dark hair similar to Chase's, and a tall, elegant woman in business attire that looked distinctly out of place on the farm. The man stopped short when he saw Chase, his face lighting up with recognition. Chase, thank God. Chase froze, staring at the stranger who clearly knew him. The woman hurried forward as well, relief evident in her expression. Mr. Easton, we've been searching everywhere for you, she said. The entire company is in chaos. Chase looked between them, his mind racing but finding no recognition. I'm sorry, but who are you? The man's smile faltered. It's me, Chase, Andrew, your brother. And I'm Victoria Reed, your executive assistant, the woman added, her brow furrowing with concern. Andrew stepped closer, examining the healing cut on Chase's forehead. Jack Harris told us you were in an accident and lost your memory. Is that true? You don't recognize me at all. Chase shook his head, feeling Ellie move supportively to his side. I'm sorry. I know my name is Chase Easton, but that's all. Everything else is blank. Andrew's face fell. The doctors in New York will be able to help. We need to get you home. Home? Chase repeated, glancing at Ellie. Victoria nodded briskly. Yes, sir. Your penthouse in Manhattan and the office. There are urgent matters requiring your attention. The Nakamura deal is hanging by a thread, and Robert Kane has been making moves with the board. Names and places that should have meant something to him floated past like fragments of someone else's life. Chase felt a familiar throbbing start behind his temples. Maybe we should all go inside, Ellie suggested gently, noting his discomfort. I can make some more coffee, and you can talk about this calmly. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Andrew explained everything to Chase. His position as CEO of Eastern Enterprises the major deal with Nakamura Industries that had been in progress, but he disappeared, and the apparent attempts by Robert Kane to use Chase's absence to take control of the company. "None of this sounds familiar," Andrew asked after he finished. Chase rubbed his temples. "Vague impressions, nothing concrete, like remembering pieces of a movie I watched years ago." Victoria showed him photos on her tablet, Chase in a boardroom, at charity galas, shaking hands with business leaders. In every image, he wore expensive suits and a confident expression that felt foreign to the man he'd become at Cedar Hill Farm. "The company needs you, Mr. Easton," Victoria said urgently. "If you don't return soon, there could be serious consequences." Chase glanced at Ellie, who had remained quietly in the background, making coffee and setting out cookies. Her face was carefully neutral, but he could sense her withdrawal, as if she were already preparing for his departure. "How long would I need to stay in New York?" he asked. "Stay?" Andrew repeated in confusion. "Chase, New York is your home, your life is there." "But my memories aren't," Chase pointed out. "And until they return, I won't be much use to anyone." "At Eastern Enterprises," Victoria straightened her blazer. "All business. The board just needs to see you, Mr. Easton. Your presence alone will stabilize the situation and buy us time." Chase stood up, suddenly feeling trapped. "I need some air, excuse me." He walked out onto the porch, breathing deeply of the clean country air. A few moments later, the screen door creaked, and he turned, expecting Ellie. Instead, his brother stepped out. "This place really got to you, huh?" Andrew asked, leaning against the railing beside Chase. Chase nodded. "You have no idea how peaceful it's been here. No pressure, no deadlines, just honest work and good people." Andrew smiled sadly. "You always did work too hard. Even as a kid, you were driven. After Mom and Dad died, you took on everything. The company raising me, you never gave yourself a break." "Our parents are dead?" Chase asked, another piece of his life falling into place. Andrew nodded. 10 years ago. Car accident. You were 29, I was 26. You stepped up, took over the company, made sure I finished business school." "We must be close then," Chase said, studying his brother's face for any spark of familiarity. Andrew hesitated. "We were. The last few years you've been distant. The company became your whole life. We barely see each other now except at board meetings." The revelation saddened Chase. "That doesn't sound like a life worth rushing back to." "It's still your life," Andrew said softly, "and there are people depending on you." Chase knew his brother was right, but the thought of leaving the farm, of leaving Ellie, felt like tearing himself in half. "One more night," he finally said. "I'll go back with you tomorrow. I owe Ellie and Henry that much." Inside, Ellie was washing dishes with more force than necessary when Victoria approached her. "Thank you for taking care of Mr. Easton." Victoria said formally, "The company will certainly compensate you for your trouble." Ellie's hands stilled in the soapy water. "It wasn't trouble, and I don't want money." Victoria studied her curiously. "You must have recognized him. His face has been on the cover of business magazines. There was that profile in Time last year." "I don't read many business magazines," Ellie replied, resuming her scrubbing. "He was just a man who needed help." "Well, he'll be better off back in New York with proper medical care," Victoria said. "I've already arranged for specialists to examine him tomorrow." Ellie nodded silently, fighting the hollow feeling in her chest. She'd known all along that Chase didn't belong here, that eventually his real life would reclaim him. She'd just never expected it to hurt this much. That evening, after Victoria and Andrew had left to check into a hotel in the nearest town, Chase found Ellie in the barn, brushing one of the goats. The sight of her, hair falling loose from her, ponytail completely absorbed in her task, made his chest ache with emotions he couldn't name. "They seem nice," Ellie said without looking up. "Your brother and your assistant." "They're strangers to me," Chase replied honestly. Ellie finally met his eyes. "But they're your family, your colleagues. They care about you." "They care about Chase Easton, CEO," he said. "I'm not sure that's who I am anymore." Ellie's hands stilled. "On the goat's coat. You still don't remember?" "Fragments, impressions. But every memory that comes back makes me less sure I want to be that person again." Chase stepped closer. The man they described, driven, isolated, all business. "He sounds miserable," People can change, Ellie said softly. That's just it, Chase replied, taking the brush from her hands, his fingers lingering against hers. I think I already have changed. Here, with you. Ellie pulled back slightly. Chase, you've been here barely 2 weeks. Your whole life is in New York. What if I want something different now, he asked. Ellie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. You can't make that decision while you're still missing half your memories. You need to go back, see the specialists. Give yourself a chance to remember everything before you decide anything. Chase knew she was right, but it didn't make the thought of leaving any easier. Will you at least let me come back to visit? Once all this is sorted out? A small smile touched Ellie's lips. Cedar Hill Farm will still be here. Chase took a deep breath. Ellie, I know this might sound crazy, but I think I'm falling... Don't, she interrupted, placing her fingers gently against his lips. Don't say something now that you might regret when your memories return. The barn door creaked open, and Henry appeared. Dinner's ready, he announced, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the tense moment between them. Ellie stepped back, giving Chase a sad smile before following her father back to the house. Chase remained in the barn a moment longer, surrounded by the simple life that had begun to feel more like home than the luxury he apparently lived in. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Chase stood by the SUV, his few borrowed belongings packed in a small bag. Andrew and Victoria were already inside, waiting. Henry shook his hand firmly. You're welcome back any time, city boy. Could use someone who can finally fix that east fence. Proper. Chase smiled, genuinely touched. Thank you for everything, Henry. He turned to Ellie, who stood with arms crossed, maintaining a careful distance. I guess this is goodbye, she said. No, Chase replied firmly. Just see you later. Ellie nodded, clearly not trusting herself to say more. Chase wanted to pull her into his arms, to promise he'd come back, but her stance warned him away. Instead, he simply said, Thank you for saving my life, in more ways than one. As the SUV pulled away from Cedar Hill Farm, Chase watched through the rear window as Ellie's figure grew smaller and smaller. The ache in his chest told him he was leaving something precious behind. The drive to Manhattan took several hours. Victoria spent most of it updating Chase on the company's status, showing him figures and reports that meant nothing to him. Andrew occasionally interjected with stories from their childhood, hoping to trigger Chase's memory. Remember when you taught me to ride a bike and I crashed into Mrs. Hoffman's rose bushes? Andrew asked with a laugh. She was so mad, but you took the blame, said you pushed me too hard. Chase smiled politely, but felt nothing. No recognition, no shared nostalgia. Just a growing sense of dread as skyscrapers began to appear on the horizon. When they finally pulled up to a gleaming high-rise in Manhattan, a doorman rushed forward, his face lighting up with recognition. Mr. Easton. Welcome back, sir. Chase stared up at the towering building. I live here? The penthouse. Victoria confirmed. The entire top floor. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like ascending into another world. When the doors opened directly into an expansive living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, Chase stood frozen. Everything was sleek, modern, and impersonal. Expensive art on the walls, designer furniture that looked barely used, not a single item out of place. Home sweet home, Andrew said, but his tone suggested he knew how foreign it must feel to Chase. Chase wandered through the space, touching surfaces, opening drawers, hoping for some spark of familiarity. In the bedroom, he found a closet larger than Ellie's entire kitchen, filled with identical suits in somber colors. Your office called, Victoria said from the doorway. There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. Robert Kane has been pushing for a vote on interim leadership. Chase nodded absently, picking up a framed photo from the bedside table, the only personal item in the entire room. It showed a much younger Chase with Andrew and an older couple who must have been their parents. The specialists will see you at 9 tomorrow morning, Victoria continued. Then we'll head straight to the office. After they left, promising to return in the morning, Chase found himself alone in the cavernous penthouse. The silence was oppressive after the constant, lively sounds of the farm, animals, wind in the trees, Ellie's laughter. He walked to the wall of windows, staring out at the city lights, so different from the starlit sky above Cedar Hill. On impulse, he pulled out the cell phone Victoria had given him and dialed the number for the farm's landline that he'd memorized before leaving. It rang several times before Ellie's voice answered, "Cedar Hill Farm." Chase felt a rush of relief just hearing her. "It's me." A pause. "Chase, did you get back okay?" "If you can call it that," he said, staring at his reflection in the window. "This place doesn't feel like home at all." "Give it time," Ellie advised gently. "Your memories will come back." "And if I don't want them to?" Chase asked. "What if I prefer the man I was becoming with you?" Ellie's sigh was soft. "Chase, you can't run from who you are. You have responsibilities, people who depend on you. I miss you," he said simply. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Ellie whispered, "I miss you too. But you need to focus on getting better now." After they hung up, Chase continued, staring out at the city, feeling more lost than he had waking up in a stranger's home after the accident. The next morning, Chase sat in a sleek doctor's office as specialists examined him. Brain scans, cognitive tests, endless questions about what he could and couldn't remember. The prognosis was cautiously optimistic. The amnesia appears to be primarily retrograde, affecting your personal history but not your procedural skills, or general knowledge, the neurologist explained. The good news is that in most cases like yours, the memories gradually return over time. "And if they don't?" Chase asked. The doctor adjusted his glasses. "Then you build new ones. The brain is remarkably adaptable." From the doctor's office, Victoria whisked him to Eastern Enterprises headquarters, a massive glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. Employees stared as he walked through the lobby, whispers following in his wake. "Remember, you don't need to say much." "At the board meeting," Victoria advised as they rode the executive elevator, "just your presence will be enough to counter Kane's moves." When the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, Chase was immediately greeted by a flurry of activity. Assistants rushed forward with papers for him to sign. A team of lawyers appeared, talking about the Nakamura deal. Everyone seemed to want a piece of him. Through it all, Chase moved as if in a dream, nodding at appropriate moments but feeling completely detached from this world that was supposedly his. The boardroom was intimidating, a long table of polished mahogany surrounded by stern-faced men and women in expensive suits. At the far end sat Robert Kane, his smooth smile faltering when he saw Chase enter. "Chase," Kane said, recovering quickly. "What a relief to see you well. We were all so concerned." Something about Kane's tone set off warning bells in Chase's mind. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes, which remained coldly calculating. As the meeting began, Chase sat quietly, listening as board members discussed company matters in jargon he barely understood. Kane kept shooting him speculative glances, clearly waiting for Chase to reveal his memory loss. During a brief break, Andrew pulled Chase aside. "You okay? You look pale." Chase loosened his tie, which had been feeling increasingly like a noose. "This doesn't feel right, Andrew. None of it does. Just hang in there," Andrew encouraged. "Victoria says Kane's been meeting secretly with our competitors. We think he was using your absence to position himself for a takeover." When the meeting resumed, Kane finally addressed Chase directly. "Since you've been indisposed, I've taken the liberty of restructuring our approach to the Nakamura deal. The original terms you negotiated were frankly unfavorable." Something clicked in Chase's mind, a fragment of memory, sharp and clear. The original terms guaranteed Nakamura's American employees would keep their jobs, he said suddenly. "Your new terms would let us dismantle their U.S. operations and move everything overseas." A hush fell over the boardroom. Victoria stared at Chase in surprise. Kane's smile tightened. "You've been briefed, I see." "No," Chase replied, another piece falling into place. "I remember. That was why Nakamura backed out initially. They wouldn't sacrifice their workers for profit margins." More memories began flooding back. Meetings, negotiations, late nights poring over contracts. Not everything, but enough. He remembered his principles, the red lines he wouldn't cross even for profit. "The deal proceeds on my original terms," Chase said firmly, "or not at all." After the meeting, as board members filed out, Kane lingered behind. "Impressive recovery," he said smoothly. "Though I'd heard your memory was still selective. Selective enough to remember you've been undermining." "Me for months," Chase replied coolly. "And meeting with Davidson at Global Tech." Kane's expression hardened. "Be careful, Chase. You might not like what else you remember if you dig too deep." As Kane left, Victoria approached with a stack of documents. "That was amazing. Your memory is coming back." "Parts of it," Chase confirmed, enough to know Kane can't be trusted. Despite the breakthrough, as the day wore on, Chase felt increasingly suffocated by the demands of his position. Every decision affected thousands of people. Every signature represented millions of dollars. The weight of it all pressed down on him, making him long for the simple clarity of farm work. By evening, exhausted, he returned to his empty penthouse. The memories that had returned only confirmed what he'd suspected. His life had been consumed by work, with little room for genuine connections or joy. He picked up his phone and dialed the farm again, needing to hear Ellie's voice. This time, there was no answer. Just as he was about to hang up, Henry picked up. "Cedar Hill Farm." "Henry, it's Chase. Is Ellie there?" There was a pause. "She's out with Jack. Dinner in town, I think." Chase felt a pang of jealousy. "Jack? The veterinarian?" "That's the one," Henry confirmed. "Been trying to court her for years. Might be making progress now that you're out of the picture." After hanging up, Chase paced the penthouse, his mind racing. The thought of Ellie with Jack bothered him more than he wanted to admit. But what right did he have to feel that way? He'd left her behind to return to this life, a life that was slowly coming back to him in pieces, none of them particularly happy. His desk phone rang, startling him. Few people had that number. "Chase Easton," he answered automatically. "Mr. Easton, this is Detective Ramirez with the NYPD. We need to talk about some irregularities we've found while investigating your disappearance." Chase frowned. "What kind of irregularities?" "Financial ones," the detective replied grimly. "Large transfers from your company's accounts to offshore holdings, and they all seem to be authorized with your electronic signature. During the time you were missing." Chase's blood ran cold. "That's impossible." "That's what we thought," Ramirez agreed, "until we traced the IP addresses. The transfers were initiated from your home computer, Mr. Easton, the one in your penthouse." As Chase hung up, pieces began falling into place. Kane's confidence, the board's suspicion, the missing funds. Someone had been setting him up while he was gone, using his absence to steal from the company and frame him for it. He needed to find proof before it was too late. But as more memories surfaced, Chase realized something else. The man he had been before the accident might have cared only about saving his company and his reputation. The man he was now cared about something else entirely. The phone rang again. This time it was Andrew. "Chase, you need to get to the hospital. It's Victoria. There's been an accident." "What happened?" Chase demanded, already grabbing his coat. Andrew's voice was tight with worry. "She was accessing some files on the company server, old transaction records. Then she went to her car and someone ran her off the road. It wasn't an accident, Chase. Someone tried to kill her." Chase froze. "Is she okay?" "Critical but stable." "Chase," she kept saying something before they took her in for surgery. Something about proof and Cedar Hill. "Cedar Hill? My Cedar Hill?" Chase asked in confusion. "I don't know, but whatever she found, it must be important and dangerous." As Chase rushed out of the penthouse, he didn't notice the dark sedan parked across the street or the man inside making a phone call. "He knows," Robert Kane said tersely. "We need to move up our timeline and find whatever Victoria discovered before he does." Miles away at Cedar Hill Farm, Ellie returned home from an uncomfortable dinner with Jack, during which she'd finally made it clear there could never be anything romantic between them. As she walked toward the farmhouse, she noticed something strange. The front door was slightly ajar, and lights she hadn't left on were blazing inside. "Dad?" she called cautiously, pushing the door open wider. "Are you okay?" The house was silent. Too silent. And as she stepped inside, she saw why. The living room had been completely ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers emptied onto the floor. "Dad," she called more urgently, fear rising in her throat. "Dad, where are you?" A soft groan came from the kitchen. Ellie rushed in to find her father on the floor, a nasty bruise forming on his temple. "Dad, what happened?" she cried, kneeling beside him. Henry looked up at her, his eyes unfocused. "Men looking for something. Kept asking about the businessman." Ellie's blood ran cold. "Chase? They were asking about Chase?" Henry nodded weakly. "Said they'd be back. Said they knew." "He'd come for you." As Ellie helped her father to a chair, her hands trembling, she noticed the small metal safe behind the kitchen pantry was open and empty. The safe where she kept the few valuable items she owned, including the flash drive Chase had been carrying when she found him after the accident. Chase burst through the hospital doors, his heart racing. Memories had been returning in fragments all day, faces, meetings, deals, but none of it mattered. Compared to the cold fear gripping him now, Victoria had been hurt, possibly because of something she'd discovered, something connected to Cedar Hill Farm. He found Andrew pacing outside the ICU, his face drawn with worry. "How is she?" Chase demanded. "Still in surgery," Andrew replied. "The doctors say it's touch and go." Chase ran a hand through his hair. "What exactly did she say about Cedar Hill?" "Just that she found something in the company records, something about property holdings in upstate New York. She mentioned a flash drive." Chase's mind raced. A flash drive. When Ellie had found him after the crash, he'd been carrying a briefcase. Had there been a flash drive inside? "I need to get back to Cedar Hill," he said urgently. "Now!" Andrew looked confused. "Chase, it's the middle of the night. Victoria's fighting for her life. Whatever's at the farm can wait until morning." "No, it can't," Chase insisted, memories suddenly crystallizing. "Kane's been embezzling from the company for months, using my electronic signature to authorize transfers while I was missing. Victoria must have found proof, and now she's here." "You think Kane tried to kill her?" Andrew asked, lowering his voice. "I'm sure of it, and I think the proof she found might be at Cedar Hill. I need to get back there before Kane does." Andrew's expression hardened. "I'm coming with you." As they hurried toward the parking garage, Chase's phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. "Chase Easton," he answered tersely. "Chase." Ellie's voice was tight with fear. "Someone broke into the farm. They hurt Dad." Chase's blood ran cold. "Are you both okay?" "Yes, but they ransacked the place. They were looking for something to do with you." "The flash drive from my briefcase after the accident," Chase said. "Did you keep it?" "Yes, in the safe behind the pantry." "Chase, it's gone. They took it." Chase leaned against the wall, his mind racing. "Ellie, listen to me. You're not safe there. You and Henry need to leave right away. Go to a neighbor's house, somewhere they won't think to look for you." "What's happening, Chase?" Ellie asked, her voice stronger now despite her fear. "Who are these people?" "I'm starting to remember everything," Chase replied grimly. "And someone wants to make sure those memories die with me. I'm on my way to you now. Please just get somewhere safe." After hanging up, Chase turned to Andrew. "Kane's men beat up Henry and ransacked the farm. They took the flash drive." Andrew's face paled. "Then we've lost our proof." "Maybe not," Chase said, a memory surfacing. "I always keep backups, and I think I know where I might have hidden one." The drive back to Cedar Hill seemed endless. As the SUV sped through the night, Chase filled Andrew in on his suspicions, how he'd discovered discrepancies in the company books just before his accident, transactions that didn't add up, how he'd begun investigating quietly, making copies of records that suggested Robert Kane had been systematically siphoning funds into offshore accounts. "I remember meeting with Nakamura now," Chase said, as the car ate up the miles. "It wasn't just about the acquisition. Their cybersecurity division had found unusual patterns in transactions between our companies. They warned me someone inside Eastern Enterprises might be using our partnership to hide illegal activities." Andrew gripped the steering wheel tighter. "And you think Kane found out you were onto him?" "I know he did," Chase replied, memories flooding back with increasing clarity. "The night of the accident, I wasn't just driving aimlessly. I was headed to a meeting with a forensic accountant in Riverside. I had evidence on a flash drive. The same flash drive that was just stolen from the farm. Chase nodded. But I always make backups, and there's only one place I would have hidden it where no one could find it. When they finally arrived at Cedar Hill Farm, the property was dark and silent. The front door stood open, the living room still in disarray from the break-in. Chase and Andrew moved cautiously through the house, calling for Ellie and Henry, but there was no response. She must have listened to me, Chase said with relief. Taken Henry somewhere safe. He headed straight for the barn, Andrew following. Close behind. Inside, Chase walked directly to the tack room where Ellie kept equipment for the horses. He counted 3 saddle racks from the left, then knelt down, feeling under the wooden bench beneath. "What are you looking for?" Andrew asked, watching as Chase's fingers searched the underside of the bench. A moment later, Chase smiled grimly, pulling out a small waterproof case taped securely to the wood. Insurance. Inside the case was a flash drive identical to the one taken from Ellie's safe. "I remember now," Chase said, turning the drive in his fingers. "After the crash, I was dazed but conscious enough to hide this. Must have been pure instinct." Andrew shook his head in amazement. "Even with amnesia, you're still the most paranoid businessman I know." A noise from outside froze them both. Car doors slamming, voices approaching. "That's not Ellie," Chase whispered, peering through the barn window to see 2 men in dark suits walking toward the house. "Kane's men must have come back to make sure they didn't miss anything." "We need to go," Andrew urged. "We have the drive. Let's get out of here and contact the police." Chase hesitated. "Not without knowing Ellie and Henry are safe." As if on cue, his phone vibrated with a text message. "At Jack's clinic in town, safe. Where are you?" Relief flooded through Chase. "They're at the veterinary clinic in town. Let's go before those goons realize we're here." They slipped out the back of the barn just as flashlight beams began sweeping across the farmyard. Moving quickly but quietly, they made it to their SUV and drove away, headlights off until they were safely down the long driveway. The veterinary clinic was a small building on the edge of town. Despite the late hour, lights were on inside. Chase barely waited for the car to stop before he was out the door, rushing inside. Ellie sat in the small waiting area, her face lighting up with relief when she saw Chase. Before he could think, he had crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "Thank God you're okay," he murmured into her hair. Ellie hugged him back fiercely. "I was so worried they might come after you too." Chase reluctantly released her, looking around. "Where's Henry?" "Jack's examining him in the back," Ellie explained. "He thinks Dad might have a mild concussion, but he'll be fine." Jack emerged from the examination room, his expression hardening slightly when he saw Chase. "Your father's resting comfortably," he told Ellie. "I gave him something to help him. Sleep." "Thank you, Jack," Ellie said sincerely. "For everything." Jack nodded curtly. "That's what friends are for." He looked at Chase. "I assume this trouble has something to do with you?" Before Chase could answer, Andrew entered the clinic, phone in hand. "The police are on their way to the farm," he announced. "And I called Detective Ramirez in New York. He's sending officers here to protect Ellie and Henry." "Will someone please tell me what's going on?" Ellie demanded. Chase took her hand, leading her to a chair. "It's complicated, but the short version is that someone at my company has been stealing millions of dollars. I discovered it just before my accident, which I now remember wasn't really an accident at all." "Someone tried to kill you?" Ellie gasped. Chase nodded grimly. "And now they've tried to kill my assistant Victoria, who found evidence connecting them to the embezzlement. Evidence that apparently led to Cedar Hill Farm." The flash drive, Ellie realized. "But why come back now? Why not take it when you were still missing?" "Because they didn't know it existed until Victoria uncovered the connection," Andrew explained. "Chase is the only one who knew he'd hidden backup evidence." Chase squeezed Ellie's hand. "I'm so sorry you and Henry got caught up in this. This is exactly the kind of chaos I never wanted to bring to your door." Ellie's eyes softened. "You didn't exactly plan to crash your car in our backyard." The clinic door opened and 2 police officers entered. After taking statements from everyone, they advised Chase that the men who had broken into the farm were gone, but officers would remain on the property overnight. "What about the flash drive?" Andrew asked Chase quietly, while the police were speaking with Ellie. Chase patted his pocket. We need to get it to Detective Ramirez in New York. It has everything needed to prove Kane's guilt. My plane's still at the regional airport, Andrew said. We could be back in the city by morning. Chase looked over at Ellie, who was speaking with one of the officers. The thought of leaving her again tore at him, especially knowing he'd put her in danger. But he knew what he had to do. We'll leave at first light, he decided. But first, I need to make sure Ellie and Henry are somewhere safe. By morning, arrangements had been made for Ellie and Henry to stay with Jack's sister in a neighboring town, well away from Cedar Hill Farm. Henry was much improved, though still confused, about the events of the previous night. Chase stood with Ellie outside Jack's clinic as dawn broke over the small town. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" he asked, hating the thought of leaving her. Ellie nodded. "The police will keep an eye on things until this is resolved. You need to go back to New York and finish what you started." "I'll come back," Chase promised. "Once Kane is arrested and things at the company are stabilized." Ellie's smile was tinged with sadness. "Chase, your life is in New York. Your company, your responsibilities. You don't belong here." "That's where you're wrong," Chase said firmly. "The past 2 weeks have shown me exactly where I belong, who I want to be." He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "And who I want to be with." Ellie's eyes widened. "You can't know that. Your memories are still coming back. Once you're fully yourself again." "I'm more myself now than I ever was before," Chase interrupted. "The man I was in New York was successful, but empty. Everything was about the next deal, the next acquisition. I had wealth but no real happiness. And you think you'd find that happiness here?" "Running a sheep farm?" Ellie asked skeptically. Chase smiled. "Not running it, just loving the woman who does." Before Ellie could respond, Andrew called from the car. "Chase, we need to go if we're going to make that flight." Chase leaned forward, pressing his lips gently to Ellie's. "This isn't goodbye," he whispered. "I promise." Back in New York, events moved quickly. The evidence on the flash drive was damning. Detailed records of transactions Kane had authorized using Chase's electronic signature, communications with offshore banks, even recorded conversations where Kane discussed his plans with associates. Detective Ramirez moved swiftly. By that afternoon, Robert Kane was in custody, charged with embezzlement, fraud, and attempted murder. The news sent shockwaves through the financial world and caused Eastern Enterprises' stock to plummet temporarily. At the hospital, Victoria had emerged from surgery and was stable, though still unconscious. Chase sat by her bedside, guilt weighing heavily on him. "You nearly died because of your loyalty to me," he told her quietly. "I won't forget that." Andrew entered the room, his expression solemn. "The board is in emergency session. They're demanding you make a statement to calm the Yi. Markets." Chase nodded wearily. "Set it up for tomorrow morning. I need to prepare." That night, alone in his penthouse, Chase stood at the wall of windows, staring out at the glittering city. His memories had almost completely returned now, filling in the gaps of who he had been. A driven, ruthless businessman who measured success in dollars and deals. A man who had let relationships with his brother, with friends, with everyone wither away as he focused solely on building his empire. He picked up his phone and dialed the number for Jack's sister's house. Ellie answered on the third ring. "How's Henry?" Chase asked. "Much better," Ellie replied. "The doctor says he can go home in a few days. How are things in New York?" "Kane's been arrested. The evidence was enough to put him away for a long time." "That's good," Ellie said, relief evident in her voice. "So it's over?" "Not quite," Chase said. "I have a board meeting tomorrow, a company. To stabilize, it could take weeks." "I understand," Ellie said softly. "You have responsibilities there." Chase took a deep breath. "Ellie, about what I said before I left." "You don't need to explain," she interrupted. "We both know you were still recovering, still confused about who you are." "I wasn't confused about how I feel about you," Chase insisted. "That hasn't changed, even with all my memories back." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Ellie sighed. "Chase, I care about you too, more than I expected to. But our worlds are too different. You belong there, with your company, your life. I belong here, with my farm, my father." "What if I told you I don't want that life anymore?" Chase asked. "What if I told you I've made a decision about my future?" Our future. I'd say you're being impulsive, Ellie replied gently. Give yourself time, Chase. Time to be sure. After hanging up, Chase spent hours thinking about what he truly wanted. By morning, his path was clear. The board meeting was tense, with executives and directors anxious about the company's future in the wake of Kane's arrest. Chase stood at the head of the table, looking at the faces turned expectantly toward him. As you all know, Robert Kane has been arrested for embezzlement and other serious charges, Chase began. The company will cooperate fully with authorities, and we will work to restore any damage done to our reputation and finances. The board members nodded in agreement, visibly relieved that Chase seemed firmly back in control. However, Chase continued, recent events have forced me to re-evaluate my priorities. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Eastern Enterprises. Shocked gasps and murmurs filled the room. Andrew stared at his brother in disbelief. I am recommending that the board appoint Andrew Easton as my replacement, Chase went on, meeting his brother's astonished gaze. He has the vision and integrity this company needs to move forward. After the meeting, Andrew cornered Chase in his office. Have you lost your mind? You're giving up the company? Everything you've worked for? Chase smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. Not giving up, moving on. The company will be in good hands with you. But what will you do? Andrew demanded. Live, Chase said simply. Really live, for the first time in years. 2 weeks later, Ellie was mucking out the barn when she heard a vehicle coming up the driveway. She stepped outside, shielding her eyes against the late afternoon sun, and saw a pickup truck she didn't recognize. Her heart nearly stopped when Chase stepped out, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. Chase, she called, unable to believe he was really there. What are you doing here? He walked toward her, a slight smile on his face. I told you I'd come back. I thought you'd be wrapped up in New York for months, Ellie said, still shocked. Chase stopped in front of her. I stepped down as CEO. Andrew's running the company now. Ellie stared at him in disbelief. You gave up your company? Why would you do that? Because nearly dying made me realize what matters, Chase said simply. And it's not corner offices or stock prices. He took her hands in his. It's this: connection, purpose, love. Ellie shook her head. Chase, you can't just walk away from your entire life. I'm not walking away, Chase corrected her. I'm walking towards something better. He gestured to the pickup. Mind if I park here? The guy at the hardware store in town said I could leave it out front, but I figured that wouldn't look very professional. Hardware store, Ellie repeated, confused. Chase smiled. I bought it. Seems like the town needs one, and I need a reason to stay around here. He stepped closer. If that's okay with you. Ellie's eyes filled with tears as she finally allowed herself to believe he was really there, really staying. You're serious? You're giving up Manhattan for Crawford Creek? I'm giving up an empty life for a chance at a full one, Chase corrected her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. I also stopped by the nursery in town. He opened his hand to reveal an apple seedling, its delicate leaves just beginning to unfurl. Your father mentioned that Tom had always wanted to plant an orchard at the edge of the east field. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I don't expect anything, Ellie, Chase said softly. I just want a chance to plant roots here. With you, if you'll have me. No pressure, no timelines. Ellie looked from the tiny seedling to Chase's hopeful face. All the doubts and fears that had plagued her since his departure melted away. She saw now what she had tried so hard to deny, that the connection between them was real, that the man standing before her was the same one she'd fallen in love with during those quiet days of healing, whether his memory was intact or not. Where exactly were you thinking of planting that? She asked, a smile spreading across her face. Chase's eyes lit up. I thought we could start at the eastern corner, where the sunlight hits first thing in the morning. We? Ellie raised an eyebrow. Chase nodded, his expression growing serious. If you'll let me stay, if you'll let me love you. Instead of answering with words, Ellie closed the distance between them, wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him down for a kiss that said everything words couldn't. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Chase rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? That's a plant that tree and then come help me fix the chicken coop, Ellie replied with a laugh. Chase laughed too, joy bubbling up inside him. Yes, ma'am. As they walked hand in hand toward the east field, the setting sun bathed the farm in golden light. Chase knew there would be challenges ahead, merging their different worlds, helping Henry through his illness, building a new life together. But for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly who he wanted to be with. Chase, Ellie said as they reached the spot where the orchard would begin. He replied, enjoying the simple pleasure of her hand in his. What about your penthouse? Your things in New York? Chase shrugged. Andrew's handling all that. There's nothing there I need. He squeezed her hand. Everything I need is right here. As they knelt together to plant the first tree of what would become their orchard, Chase knew he had finally found what had been missing from his life all along. Not just love, but purpose. A place to belong, a future to build with someone who saw him not for his wealth or power, but simply for himself. The road that had brought him to Cedar Hill Farm might have begun with an accident, but as he pressed the soil gently around the seedling's roots, Chase knew it had led him exactly where he was meant to be. There, Ellie said, sitting back on her heels to admire their work. Our first tree. The first of many, Chase promised. As they walked back toward the farmhouse, arms around each other, the small seedling stood straight and tall against the yew. Sunset, its roots already beginning to take hold in the rich soil of Cedar Hill Farm, just as Chase's heart had taken root in a life he never knew he wanted, but now couldn't imagine living without. 6 months later, a thick envelope arrived at Cedar Hill Farm, addressed to both Chase and Ellie. Inside were legal documents showing that someone had anonymously paid off all of Henry's medical bills and placed the deed to Cedar Hill Farm solely in Ellie's name, free and clear of any mortgages or liens. Did you do this? Ellie asked Chase as they sat on the porch, examining the papers. Chase shook his head. I would have told you if I had. Besides, I signed away most of my assets when I left the company. A small note fell from between the pages. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message made Ellie's breath catch. Tom always wanted to make sure you and the farm were taken care of. Consider this his final gift to you both. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. But how? Who would do this in Tom's name? Chase reread the documents, his brow furrowing. The transaction was processed through a law firm in New York, one that Eastern Enterprises sometimes worked with. Could Andrew have done this? Ellie asked. Maybe, Chase mused. But why the secrecy? And why mention Tom? The mystery remained unsolved. But as spring turned to summer, the apple seedling grew stronger, sending its roots deep into the soil of Cedar Hill Farm, much like the love between Chase and Ellie, which deepened with each passing day. Sometimes at night, Chase would still dream of his old life, the skyscrapers, the boardrooms, the constant pressure. But he would wake to find Ellie sleeping peacefully beside him, and he knew without a doubt that he had found something far more valuable than anything he'd left behind. Where the road had ended, a new path had begun, one that led not to wealth or power, but to the true richness of a life filled with love, purpose, and the simple joy of growing things together. The end.